Hi there. In this video, I'm going to quickly talk about EQ. So EQ is one of the most important things you use when you're mixing. And basically what it is a volume control for different frequencies. I'm just going to open the mixer. And I'm going to solo the main lead part by right-clicking here. So, in FL Studio, you have a couple of different ways to EQ. You can either select an EQ plugin. So, under Filter, you could choose Fruity Parametric EQ2, and it'll open up an equalizer. But an easier way of doing it is just using the EQ at the bottom of the inspector here. Usually I'd use a parametric EQ, but just to teach you what EQ does, I'm going to show you using this one. First of all, I'm going to make the mixer a little bit taller so I can see all of the controls. So, this here is the EQ. I'm just going to set these all back to 0. So, as you can see there, the line is flat. This is showing we have no EQ active. Now, I'm going to adjust this middle fader here. If I slide the fader upwards, it boosts frequencies, and if I pull it down, it will cut them. So, we have a few different controls here. Firstly is this, which is the gain. So, which is measured in decibels. We can see there, at the moment, it's at 8.6 decibels. And now it's at minus 9.7. So if I play that back, you'll be able to hear what it's doing. The next control we have is this one here, and this is the frequency. So with this dial, we can adjust where we're making the boost or the cut. So if I just increase the boost here, and now move this dial, we'll be able to see it's moving from left to right on the frequency spectrum. So this is choosing the frequency that we are boosting or cutting. This is measured in hertz. So at the moment it's at 752 hertz, and up here it's at 3.6 kilohertz. So that's 3.6 thousand hertz. Just listen to the difference it makes when I move it around. Now, the last control we have is this, which is a Q factor. So this adjusts the width of the boost or the cut. So we can have it set very thin or have it really wide. Listen to the difference this makes. So, when working with EQ, we have the gain to adjust the volume, we have the frequency, so you can adjust where in the audio spectrum you're changing the volume. For example, down on the left here is the bass, here are the mids, and up here is the treble. And then we have the Q factor, which is the width of the cut or the boost we're making. So, I'm just going to set this back to 0. When you're EQing, one thing that's really important is to make sure you're doing that within the mix. Because there's no point in making this instrument sound really good on its own, because when it's playing with everything else in the mix, it's going to change how we hear it. So, I don't know if you can tell there, but there's quite a lot of low frequency content in this lead part. Now if I unsolo this, if you're listening on headphones or studio monitors, you might be able to tell that cutting some of the low frequencies out of this lead part helps give the song more clarity. So, in this situation, where I don't really need the low frequencies, it's good to cut them out. Now, as this is the lead part, I want to make sure it's at the front of the mix. So, to do that, you can increase the higher frequencies. As you could hear there, when I turned this down, it was pushing the lead part into the background. When I increased it, it came more up to the forefront. So, these are two ways you can use EQ to help improve your mix. It takes years to perfect the art of EQing, so it's important you play around and make mistakes when using EQ. It will come to you with time. Something else you might want to think about when using EQ is creating space in the mix in different areas. So for example, if I solo this 3 oscillator pad here, you can hear that not only is this part quieter when I've added the EQ, but it's also taking up far more space in the mix. So what you can do is shape the sounds tonally so they fit in with the mix better. Here I've cut the bass out because we have the bass instrument which is filling that space along with the kick drum. And I've cut some of the highs because I want to save that space for the other high frequency parts. For example, the shaker. As you can see here on the shaker, I've cut out all the bass. I'm just going to solo this. This is a good example because you can barely hear the lower frequency content of the shaker. So I can cut it all out. This will just help make space in the mix for the other parts. Now if I solo the bass part, and then reduce the bass, I'm going to increase the frequency so it's cutting all the way up to around 600 Hz. If I listen to that in the mix, we end up losing a lot of important low frequency content. So in this situation, you really wouldn't want to cut out all the bass frequencies. As you can see here, in the pads I've cut out a lot of the high frequencies and the low frequencies to save space for the other parts which I want them. And in some examples, like this one on the lead, you can see I boosted the higher frequencies to give it more presence. One thing I'm going to show you quickly now is the Fruity Parametric EQ. I've got it here on the master bus. This works in the same way as this EQ down here, but it just gives us more options. So in this EQ here, we have one band for boosting and cutting in a parametric shape, which is this sort of bell-shaped curve. Then we also have a low shelf, which will boost or cut all the lows. And we have a high shelf, which does the same for the highs. In this Fruity Parametric EQ, we just have a lot more options. We've got the low and the high shelves, which I can adjust here. But then we have 5 of these parametric nodes. So this just gives you a lot more flexibility when EQing. So once you're confident using this EQ down here, if you feel like you need to make a boost and a cut in 2 different areas of the frequency spectrum, you can do so because you've got more bands. So if I just bypass this EQ on our master, I'm just going to make sure this one's all level. And now listen to it engaged. It gives us a lot of flexibility on how we can tonally shape our sounds. One thing that's good about this EQ, it gives you little hints here of the areas. So we can see we've got the sub bass at the bottom, then the bass, low mids, mids, high mids, this area of presence, and then the treble. So if you ever get stuck on where to boost or cut, you can always reference against this to see if you're boosting and cutting in the right areas. So for example now, I want to make the track brighter, so I know to boost in this treble area. One last thing I'm going to mention is when you're EQing, be careful when boosting because it can dramatically increase the volume of your signal. So I don't know if you noticed earlier, but when I was working on the lead, for example, if I boosted this frequency band too much, the audio started to distort. So that was a brief introduction of EQ and how you can use it in your track. I hope you found this lecture useful, and I'll see you in the next one.